Hey, hello, what's up? Let me start by saying this. AJ and I worked for a very long time today trying to figure out what's the best thumbnail and title for this video that would perfectly explain what it is. And to be honest, I don't know if we ever found what that, we landed on something for now. It's probably going to change by the time this video comes out, but I don't know what it is that perfectly explains what this video is, because it's kind of a complicated subject, I think, but very interesting. But that brought me to an idea that I had. Here's what it is. When you finish watching this video, when you finish watching the video, stop commenting, stop it, get out of there, stop it. When you finish watching this video, leave a comment down below. You got 60 characters to work with of what's a better title than whatever we came up with, which I still don't know what it is. Write that down below, and then we're gonna pull some of those and then talk about them on our podcast this weekend, and you'll get some brownie points. That's all I've got to give right now. I've got many brownie points to give to you. So in any case, I thought that would be fun, but it does bring us to, the actual question of what are we talking about this week? Well, it's actually a simple concept in practice, just one that's hard to describe in few words. Nintendo has so many IP that are great and loved by many people, and one of the best ways to benefit from that is to iterate on the IP with a new game release every once in a while, right? Well, so far it has been, but what if there are some games, or at least some series, that would be best served to not get new games, but rather be their own platforms that slowly evolve over time? Where the game comes out on the Switch, but instead of getting a sequel on the next console, it just ports that game over and continues being iterated upon. In any case, I think it's an interesting idea, but it would require a pretty big shift in mindset and landscape, but would be worth considering for a whole bunch of reasons. However, it does also have a number of drawbacks, which we'll talk about in this video as well. And you know what? You'd think that I'd have a conclusive opinion going into this video, but I kind of don't. So we'll just be on this journey together and find out what it's like and what should happen with these platform games. You know what? Let's talk about it. As I said, there are pros and cons, but we'll spend most of our time talking about the ideas themselves and finally finish up with the arguments for or against this strategy. I've got 5 Nintendo games in mind that would be well suited for this strategy, but before we go into those, let's actually talk about some existing games that already kind of use this treatment so that we can glean some information for those to come back to later. The first is very pertinent as it releases on Switch as of the day this video goes up, October 15th, and it is Overwatch. This game came out in 2016 and continues to get new content, and this is some people's only game that they play regularly. But its popularity doesn't really speak to our main point. While on one hand, you could certainly argue that this game hasn't had enough time to be considered a platform game and is still just on its first entry, with a sequel to come at some point down the road. It's got to be addressed, though, that Overwatch is treated as a platform game. For example, Overwatch has seasons. This is very different from a Call of Duty type game that has multiplayer that's really hyped up, then dies out by the next year when the following game is released. Instead, Overwatch has new content added, new characters, and new competitive arcs, partly due to the season strategy in place. Interestingly, the same sort of seasonal approach is intact in Diablo 3, which is also a Blizzard Activision game, interesting, whereby every quarter, a season and the grind for loot starts over again, every time. But that is a bit odd, because even though Diablo 3 is 7 years old, which is pretty old for a current game, it's a numbered entry, so we're expecting to see Diablo 4 at some point down the road too. We'll revisit that later. More similar to Overwatch, though, is Fortnite. This again is a platform sort of game that has seasons, and now we even know it has chapters. At the time of recording, we're actually in the Blackout portion after Chapter 1 and going into Chapter 2, and this really feels like the right play to be able to expand its lifetime by a good margin. The break in gameplay also means that in just a day or two of the game being down, people will be excited to be playing the game again, even though they were barely gone. And Fortnite isn't really the kind of game that I expect to have a sequel, it's more just one that I'd expect to see growing and changing over time, which is exactly what we're talking about. And then 2 last quick examples are very different kinds of games, but they're exactly what we're looking at here. They have no sequels, they've been around for decades, and they are still current and evolving at the time. The first is World of Warcraft. There hasn't been a World of Warcraft 2 and it's still going strong. They have expansions, they have DLC and all that kind of stuff, but it's just still going on. And it's also freaking Blizzard. Weird. And then the last one is not really a video game. It's the Pokemon card game. And you might think it's a cop-out, but since you can play it online on your computers and all that stuff, it kind of counts. But in any case, it will be helpful for later. Now that we've got a bit of a foundation for this conversation, let's get into the nitty-gritty. And some of these I actually have way more ideas for than I can fit in this video, so if you'd like to see a dedicated video on some of these individually, let me know in the comments. Also, I've got one brand new game idea in here, as well as one unfortunately pretty controversial opinion. But you'll find out what they are as more time comes. Starting off with probably the most obvious though, let's get this one out of the way. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate! Alright, what'd you think? Something else? Nope. This was a talking point even when the game was first coming out. The big picture is the question of where do they go after Smash Ultimate? Sakurai himself has said that they'll never be able to get as big a roster again as they've gotten this time, because everyone's here, right? So either the next game they can decide to completely change the mechanics, meaning every character would get retooled, meaning there would be fewer characters, or they can just keep Smash Ultimate as the Smash game and add new characters once a quarter as well as features maybe twice a year. To be fair, to achieve this, I think they would need to do more events than they do right now in the game. We've got Spirit events, which aren't really for competitive players at all, and then there's online tournament events, which also don't seem to really be for competitive players very much. So they're gonna have to work on that. To be fair, if this is gonna be a platform game, so far they're going about it the right way. They'd want to announce new content as it was coming out, and right now, the new content is The Fighters, which, as Smash also is headlining EVO 2020 in January, we could easily hear about Character 5 right around then. So that said, they could go through 2 whole Fighters passes, encompassing 2 full years before needing to bring the marketing cycle back around with new major features. Obviously, the question of Switch lifespan does come into question here, but assuming the Nintendo swap or whatever comes out in 3 or 4 years, should we get a new Smash that would be either incredibly different with new mechanics or barely different at all? Or should this game come over with some new upgrades? Well, that's the question. Splatoon! So this would obviously not be Splatoon 2. They're not going to bring up a game that they've already stopped supporting and say, hey, it's back and here to stay. But unless the next entry is an actual Splatoon 3, this could be one of the best candidates to get released as Splatoon Showdown or something like that, and just keep getting updates. To be honest, you wouldn't even really need to change that much about how Splatoon 2 worked in the first place. It already had events, new content all the time, and just stayed really popular. But I do remember asking my friend Mitch if he'd be interested in joining the rungs of Splatoon 2, and he said he didn't really want to join at a time when other people were probably falling off, which brought up some interesting thoughts. Honestly, Splatoon 2 still seems to be very popular, but this would be a game that would need to have its strategy stated right off the bat by saying this game is here to stay and we'll keep supporting it. In my opinion, this would be a great game to continue to have free DLC and then once a year have an expansion pack come out that has mostly single player and a little bit of multiplayer as well. And as much as there is dislike for the timed mechanic of Salmon Run, it does kind of extend the lifetime of the game. Mario Maker! Well, this one seems pretty much like super obvious. But weirdly enough, not obvious to Nintendo yet or something. We've had this game a third of a year now, and the only update that came out was the ability to play with friends, which frankly, maybe they delayed everything else they were gonna be working on to try to get that out the door as soon as possible. I don't really know, but it's crazy to me that Nintendo hasn't added or announced any additions to Mario Maker 2 yet, considering how much they ended up adding to Mario Maker 1. But in any case, I don't even need to get into too much detail for you to get how great this one would be. The game is 100% community driven. People make the levels, people play the levels, people watch people play and make the levels. The game promotes itself, and adding just one item reinvigorates the game for months. I actually follow a lot of Mario Maker 2 streamers on YouTube, and although it doesn't seem to be taking over the internet as a whole quite as much as the first one, the community is very strong. The obvious long-term growth plan would be the addition of items and themes. There's really nothing at all that a Mario Maker 3 could do that they couldn't just do in Mario Maker 2. So when another Nintendo console comes out, it would be easier to just have the Mario Maker game than have a whole hype cycle for the next title. Mario Kart! And I am gonna have some controversial opinions about Mario Kart as a platform game, so here we go. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is actually one of the best cases for this whole thing. All that game is just Mario Kart 8 from the Wii U with all of its DLC included, and a couple new characters, a few new items, and the battle mode returned. But that's it, and it's the best-selling game on the Switch as of June 2019 by quite a bit. And this may be one I have the most ideas on, but before I go into several that follow a similar theme, let me say this. Please, Nintendo, when you do stuff like this, port old games to new systems, give us some options. Maybe we want everything unlocked at the start, but maybe you're like me and you want to unlock stuff yourself because single player content is good for doing things. Honestly, I played Mario Kart 8 Deluxe less than pretty much all the other Mario Kart games just because I already had everything unlocked. So like the option's good. But you know what? That wasn't even my controversial opinion. My controversial opinion is I have an old phone. Nah, Mario Kart Tour, you dummy. There's a lot of things that aren't great about Mario Kart Tour. The possibilities of monetization are pretty egregious, and, well, it really is just a lot of varieties of that statement. But this game actually holds some keys to solutions for how to make Mario Kart an exciting platform game. Okay, we already know that Mario Kart is just about the best local multiplayer that you can get, but the online is pretty thin, all things considered. You can obviously race against friends or randos, and I guess you can do the battle stuff, and that's about it. But Mario Kart Tour is essentially doing that seasons kind of a thing, disregarding, of course, the fact that it's not really multiplayer on there, so forget about that for now. But it only lets you play on specific stages at a time within a specific theme, which for Mario Kart Tour is traveling around the world. So maybe for our Mario Kart, it would be like periods of time or something like medieval times or prehistoric times. I don't know, something like that. And a lot of more little ideas in there. Oh, and also perhaps more of the challenge kinds of things that are in Mario Kart Tour and were in Mario Kart DS, and that was it, and they never came up again. That kind of stuff would be nice. I actually almost made an entire video on this topic, but decided to stick to the broader one for now. Let me know though if you'd like a video on this specifically though. I promise I actually have some pretty fun ideas. But for now, we've got to get to our last game. Pokemon Battle Stadium! Not a real game. Well, not yet. This idea actually came up at some point when AJ and I were talking about Pokemon Sword and Shield, and how if there were a local battle function, this would pretty much be a full Pokemon game with a full Pokemon Stadium inside. But nothing like that has been announced yet, and I wonder if some of the reason could be for my hypothetical game, Pokemon Battle Stadium. The idea behind this is pretty simple. This would be the Pokemon battling platform for the National Dex as it stands in the current meta, which might or might not be actually separate from the core game as it needs to be. With the integration of Pokemon Home, this would be a great place to have all of your National Dex Pokemon directed. It would essentially allow the single player of the game and the multiplayer of battling to be somewhat disparate. And for the less competitive, this game could also feature local battles like in Pokemon Stadium where you rent out Pokemon, and also mini games, which we all love. I mean, honestly, they could pull as much from Pokemon Stadium as they want, and I would be happy. It would be a really great platform to have all the content as it evolves over time, pun absolutely intended. The reason I said before that the Pokemon card games would prove to be a good example is that the online platform is a place to play the card game even when you're not with someone physically. So this would be a similar idea, but for the Pokemon battles rather than the card games. AJ and I could absolutely gather more ideas on this one as well, so again, let us know down in the comments if you'd be interested in a video about that. So that's all the 5 games, but with the little time we have left, let's talk about why these may or may not actually happen. Firstly, the problems that these solve is actually to allow developers to be spread out more evenly, especially at Nintendo, where they work on so many games in-house. If they're not making a brand new game in every franchise every 4 years or so, they can afford more flexibility to their resources and shuffle them over to working on brand new IP, reviving old ones, or anything else. And to me, it's much more exciting to have continued content in an existing IP alongside more brand new ones, compared to getting a new iteration of the same games every generation. But here's the major downside: interest and revenue. Interesting things have to keep happening, and it has to be very clearly marketed. There's a huge hype boost that happens when a new game is announced, and more people are willing to try it than jump in at an expansion of an existing game where they feel already as if they're behind. So even if it's a more economical stance, it's certainly a less marketable strategy to have these platform games. So where do these meet in the middle? There's definitely other factors, but these are probably the most significant on either side. I think, or rather I hope, that we'd get more Mario Kart 8 Deluxe type situations, just with more rollout of content over time. Instead of having a new Smash for the next console, why not release a definitive edition there, and then on that same platform have a new Mario Kart? So by staggering these, if we can make some of these kinds of games last 2 generations instead of 1, it means that we have that much more room for new IPs and new creations that are really fun and exciting, while we still get to play all the kinds of games we want. We'll still have a Mario Kart, we'll still have a Smash, it just might be the one from the last gen that has some more added to it. And as an honorable mention before we go, stupid Super Mario Party honestly would have been a great fit for this formula, but Nintendo did not do that game justice, all things considered. So let's close with what I think is the big idea: diminishing returns. Sometimes it takes so much work to do something that's only a little bit better, so you may as well work on something else that allows more creativity until there's a larger gap to be filled. But that's what I think. What do you think? Remember that comment challenge from the way beginning? What would have been a good title for this video? Let me know down in the comment section below. And while you're down there, give a like to the video and subscribe to fanatixfour for more videos like this from me and from AJ at 4 p.m. Eastern Time every Tuesday and Thursday. So thanks for joining and watching this video. We have a fun community here, and we look forward to you joining that. Peace and blessings.